What the heck is going on, football fans? DF Stu back here again, and today we're going to be building some DraftKings lineups. If you missed my video from earlier in the week, you could find that somewhere down in the comment section below, but basically what we did was we picked one player from each position on the DraftKings main slate, and we think that those players are going to either be in a real good spot value-wise, or just simply the potential to smash it this week. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, if you could hit that like button, if you could hit that subscribe button, if you could leave me a comment in the comment section below, it would go so far to help me grow my channel. So I've already got my 5 guys plugged into this lineup, but we got to talk about something first. Yesterday, the COVID monster got another one. Matt Stafford out. How does this affect my Swift pick? Well, my first reaction was to go like this. Dalvin Cook and Vikings defense. And just restart. But since I already put out a video, I got to try to convince you guys that, well, maybe Chase Daniels isn't going to be all that bad for Mr. Swift. So something that's just crazy to me, the 12-year veteran backup Chase Daniel has made almost $50 million playing in the NFL. He's only started 9 NFL games, and he's made about $230,000 for each one of his completions. That's insane. I mean, really, what the heck am I trying to do trying to win a DraftKings tournament when I could be Alex Moraning it up on the bench of an NFL team, right? So what does Chase Daniel mean for us from a fantasy perspective? Well, I expect Detroit to rely on the run game a lot more in this game. Am I a little bit worried that Adrian Peterson's going to work his way in there and against his former team, maybe try to steal the spotlight a little bit? Yes, but Swift has been getting more and more touches every week. He's getting more and more snaps in. He's getting more and more targets. Swift seems to be their guy for their future. Adrian Peterson is on his way out, and I think this is a spot where he's got to give you a show-me game. One interesting stat I did find about Chase Daniel, however, is over his last 4 starts, 35% of his passes have gone to his running backs, whereas Matt Stafford, over the course of this entire year, only 19.5 of them have gone to his running back. A quarterback that's going to throw to his running backs more often is only going to bode well for Swift. If you feel like Chase Daniels is going to get you away from Swift, perhaps J.K. Dobbins or his partner Gus Edwards or Nakeem Hines or maybe even Justin Jackson down at the below 5K range would be good for you this week. I'm still going to go with Swift. I'm firing up with somewhat confidence. All right, that's enough Detroit Lions talk for me for a week. I got to go with Lockett and Diggs in this lineup. The Seattle-Buffalo game is projecting to be super high scoring. Seattle has given up a ton of fantasy points to opposing wide receivers all year long, and Buffalo has looked pretty weak against the slot guys, and Russ Wilson has just been cooking all year long. DK Metcalf is also a perfectly great play here. I just worry that maybe Tre'Davious White is going to shadow him a little bit more, but he's been a little bit weaker this year than he has in the past, and DK Metcalf has been just an absolute monster anyways. It seems like you're either going to go with Lockett or Metcalf on any given week. One goes off, the other guy kind of not so goes off. They have had weeks where they've done all right together, but I'm going to go with Lockett this week, in this lineup at least. It's still early in the week, but I think that if you're not at least targeting 1 or 2 guys from that Seattle-Buffalo game, you're probably going to be doing something wrong this week. With our other running back selection, we're going to go with David Johnson from the Houston Texans versus a very weak Jacksonville Jaguars defense. David Johnson's already played against the Jaguars once this year. He was 4 yards away from hitting his 100-yard bonus. If you don't know about the 100-yard bonus, in DraftKings, once you hit 100 yards rushing or receiving, you get an extra 3 points. 3 points in DraftKings is the difference between thousands of positions sometimes. So keep that in mind. The Jacksonville Jaguars defense also played against Swift in Week 6. That was the week that Swift put up 30.3 fantasy points. And they also played against Aaron Jones in Week 2. That was the game that Aaron Jones put up over 40 fantasy points. Also, I think that it's important to note that in this game, Jacksonville will be starting quarterback Jake Luton, the 6th-round pick from Oregon. I'm not expecting very good things out of him. I expect probably some turnovers, potentially putting Houston in a position to score real quick, which is just going to help David Johnson. Maybe it's going to be a game where Houston gets up early and they just kind of use David Johnson to run the clock out. For us in a fantasy perspective, that works out pretty well. So for our final pick in this roster, we're going to do something a little bit goofy, and that's going to be going with another tight end in our flex position, Mr. Darren Waller. So going with a double tight end strategy is a little bit unorthodox, but it's a good way to separate yourself from the field. And I mean, looking at Darren Waller's targets in every single week, those are wide receiver targets. 8 targets, 16 targets, that 11 targets. Yeah, their offense runs through this guy. Unfortunately, we're looking at last week where, well, that game was a real windy one, and Las Vegas pretty much just ran Josh Jacobs over and over and over again. I mean, really, if Darren Waller was a wide receiver at 5,800, seeing that target share, I'd be all over him all day. So, reviewing this lineup, we've got Herbert and Henry, and then Waller in the same game. That game's projected to be high scoring. We've got Lockett and Diggs from the same game. That's supposed to be a high scoring game. Swift and Jefferson. That one's supposed to be high scoring as well. And then David Johnson. That game's also projecting to be over 50 points scored. We went with the Falcons defense because, well, Drew Lock, maybe he kind of sucks and he might throw some picks. And they cost $2,500, so why not? So with McCaffrey being back this week, I thought it was important to try to fit him into a lineup. So I went with McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill from that game. I left my 5 guys in, and I kept Lockett in as well. But instead this time we're going to run it back with Gabriel Davis to save us some money. Gabriel Davis is a guy who's been seeing about 60% of the snaps over the last couple weeks for the Buffalo Bills. We can pull up his profile here. His stat line over the last couple weeks hasn't been anything really to write home about. But looking at the Tennessee game, he did see 9 targets, 5 catches. That's reassuring, but that was a game that John Brown was out. I do question how John Brown's knees are. He ran routes on 95% of his snaps last week, but he didn't actually have any catches, I don't believe. At least he put up a stinker in fantasy. I do know that for sure. But really, whenever you're going to spend only $3,200, only $200 from the minimum price on a player, you're going to get stat lines like this, but we're hoping for a stat line like these. So here's another option that gives you Dalvin Cook instead of Justin Jefferson. I think that might be the better, or maybe just the more popular way that people are going to go. If you want to get different, I think Jefferson is a great way to go. I think people are going to fade him a little bit. He's kind of been very boomer bust, whereas Dalvin Cook's been extremely consistent, scoring a touchdown in every game he's been healthy this year. The only real worry I have about that Minnesota-Detroit game from the Minnesota side of things is if Minnesota can get up ahead of Detroit early because of Detroit's QB potential struggles, then Dalvin Cook might get phased out of the game in the second half for Madison, as Dalvin Cook had been battling an injury. So keep that in mind. The Josh Jacobs pick here, it kind of goes with what we were talking about in our lineup building video last week. We had gone in that video with Henry, and then as our quarterback, we had gone Burrow and Boyd. So this option, we're going to go with Herbert and Henry, and then Josh Jacobs on the other side. Maybe Josh Jacobs scores a couple touchdowns, and then the Chargers are forced to pass the ball more, and Henry's going to be that guy that catches them in the end zone. So that's what we're hoping. Well, that just about wraps things up for me today. I hope this gets you thinking about the Week 9 NFL DraftKings main slate. Teaches you a little bit about building some lineups, some things to maybe think about, some maybe stacks you hadn't been thinking about before. If you've got any guys that you really like this week, let me know in the comments section below. I'll check them out. Also, if anybody's interested in maybe me putting out a sleeper video on Saturday, basically sleepers are players that are going under-owned. Projections come out by Saturday, so we should have a good idea of who the most owned guys will be on the slate. But sleepers are also guys that are just low-cost guys, maybe just players that people are overlooking, guys that have been seeing their target shares increasing over the last couple weeks, and maybe they're ready for that breakout game. So yeah, let me know in the comment section below if Saturday sleepers would be a good option for you in your daily fantasy watching world. Until next time, DF Stu, out.